Right now on Tech Radio, France to big tech. We're just not that into you anymore.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and the world. This is Tech Radio. You're welcome to episode 1101. This week looking back on the top stories of the week, including France's decoupling from big tech, TikTok goes full MAGA, and more job cuts at Amazon. Later I'll be talking with Logitech's Elaine Laird about the challenge of getting more girls to consider careers in science, technology, engineering and maths.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Niall Kitson, and joining me this week is TechCentral.ie columnist Jason Walsh. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Niall. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, let's jump straight into our biggest story of the week, I suppose. One that's pretty close to your heart, given where you're living at the moment. So France has decided, or rather the French public sector, or Emmanuel Macron, whoever you want to give credit for this decision, they've decided that Teams, Zoom and WebEx, they're just not compatible with French values anymore, and they're looking at developing their own alternative. What do you make?
Yeah, it's not the first time they've done this, and in a sense, I'm pleased to see it. As you say, one of my preoccupations in the column has been how Europe has let its technology sector slide. Europe had quite a significant advantage coming into the microcomputer era in the 1980s, and it also had its legacy and still quite important mainframe business, but that has all been allowed to die on the vine. And of course, the internet really was driven by American tech companies, and we're really paying the price now. But just to give this some context, what has happened in this specific case is the French public sector has decided to create its own video conferencing platform and a Teams and WebEx alternative called Visio. It's not the first time they've done this. They launched about 2 years ago a messaging app to get, basically public servants and politicians off WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram, and they have one. I think it's called Ovid. It's been quite a success within that niche, but it hasn't got broader acceptance. Let me put it to you this way: I don't have it on my phone, even though it's an open source encrypted platform. All the good things we would want. Likewise, we've seen movement in France on supporting a significant frontier AI startup in the form of Mistral, which has Le Chat, their AI. But again, is it a serious competitor to Anthropic and ChatGPT? We really don't know yet. And then, of course, we had search engines. The French pumped a lot of money into search engines to kind of mixed results. No one has ever managed to take over or get any market share significantly beyond Bing, of course, Google being the giant elephant in the room. So, there's also talk about an EU-wide Linux distribution. So, I'm delighted that we are thinking about this, but what I think is the problem is that we needed to be thinking about this in the 1990s. If you look back at the European tech landscape, we had some enormous companies. We had the likes of Nixdorf and Siemens in Germany in the mainframe space, ICL in the UK, Bull in France. On the personal computer space, we had Olivetti, we had Acorn. All of these companies, some of them are still around in some form, but they really withered on the vine. That was when we kind of all congregated toward Microsoft Windows 95 and then Mac OS in certain specialist applications. And that, of course, also coincided with the early days of the internet and the web becoming a big thing. And we are now suffering from a 20 or 30 year tech lag. So I'm very pleased to see any alternatives to these big American platforms, but I think we need to be doing more foundational work. The question is, what would that foundational work look like today? Because it's not going to be creating operating systems and all the things that I like. ASML on the lithography side is, of course, an enormous success story, but where are the European chip designers beyond ARM? There are some companies designing and manufacturing into the automotive and embedded markets, but we really don't have a competitor either for the likes of NVIDIA or AMD or Intel or TSMC on the manufacturing side. So I would like to see a broader, and use these words, these unfashionable words, industrial strategy.
It's kind of an interesting situation in that a lot of the R&D has happened in the States, but the manufacturing has happened in China. And the way that the global markets have realigned, we're seeing more R&D and manufacturing in China. So I think we're coming to a stage where the US is actually going to fall behind at that research and development level, which it does open up a space for Europe to work in. But as you said, I think, will they be able to keep up the pace? Is the money there to actually fund the research to come up with these alternatives?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. I mean, the VC markets, they do exist in Europe, but they're not as anywhere near as mature or as wealthy as the United States. Is VC the right model anyway? I don't know. It's the model we're all used to because we learned everything from Silicon Valley. China has a somewhat different model, obviously, with an enormous state-directed economy, but plus VC on top of that. I think there's a lot of interesting work comes out of the sort of very blue sky research side. I used to be a reporter for a publication aimed at academics in science and technology. And, there's some really interesting stuff going on there. But, how do you translate that into commercial work? That's very fraught, very difficult. The nature of that kind of research is a lot of the time it goes nowhere. I think what you're talking about in terms of the US falling behind in R&D, I definitely could see that happening. China was never going to be satisfied, stuck in the middle income trap. It's quite clear its strategy was to take over manufacturing, build up from there, basically to do what Japan did, but on a much bigger scale. And that's what we're seeing play out. We saw that in the AI wars when everyone was talking about how expensive the compute was, the NVIDIA chips, and then China came along with a much cheaper way of doing it. And of course, that fits into the kind of 80-20 tech thing, where if you can get 80% of the job done at 20% of the cost, you're onto a winner. Again, whether or not that's the right strategy for life, I don't know, but it is the one that we all understand from Silicon Valley. Europe definitely has an opportunity, but we really need to take it more seriously. And, that includes non-EU countries, such as the UK, such as Switzerland. We really need the 46 countries of the Council of Europe to really start to take this stuff seriously. That's my view anyway. But, I'm happy to see private and public things going on. We have a couple of Linux distributions based in Ireland. Zorin OS is based there. Okay, Linux isn't really European. It's a global / American thing, but it is free and open source software, so we can all check it. I believe Linux Mint is actually based there too. So that's the operating systems covered. We could do with a decent browser. We're doing some work in AI. Video apps and chat apps, I'm quite happy to see them, but I would like to see a broader ecosystem. The thing is, though, as our listeners will know, and Niall, the tech infrastructure landscape is just constantly in a state of flux. All of the things that someone of my generation is concerned with, like operating systems with preemptive multitasking, a good application suite, those are all kind of dying out. Everything's moving to the web. Even when you have an application, maybe it's like Signal on your desktop or Slack or Teams, oftentimes they're not really applications. They're just web browsers with a wrapper around them. That's not a future I particularly enjoy, but given that it is where we're going, someone like me might be giving you the wrong advice, saying, we need to build everything from the ground up, from the silicon to the operating system to the application layer.
And just for anyone with general interest, you can find out loads of alternatives from Europe to what we have in the US on the website goeuropean.org. So it's a very handy resource if you just want to at least see what's out there. And next point I'd like to make kind of segues into our next story. I mean, this is the situation in France is pretty much, for me, there's a straight line from the Trump inauguration ceremony to where we see in France at the moment, in particular, that picture of the oligarchs of Zuckerberg, of Bezos, Sundar Pichai and Elon Musk, all in a row, very much in front of the Trump cabinet, signaling, hey, these are the guys that are in charge. So, they've looked after me. So what are you guys going to do for me? Because that's the nature of the Trump presidency, being transactional. Another transaction that happened only in recent weeks that we've talked about extensively on the show has been the sale of TikTok's US operation by ByteDance to a consortium, including some VC companies, but also the Ellisons and Michael Dell, who are notable Trump supporters. And wouldn't you know it, earlier this week, all mentions of ICE and all mentions of the tragic shooting last Saturday, all of a sudden people couldn't make mention of them, couldn't upload videos. The official version, our information said, sorry, it's a bug, mea culpa. Look, we can sort this out really quickly. There's an awful lot of people are not convinced. I personally am not. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the facts to hand in the sense that I don't know why this decision was made, but I can tell you what strikes me. Look, at the risk of hyperbole, I was watching a YouTube video recently about North Korean smartphones, if you can believe such a thing. They buy them in from China, rebrand them, stick their software layer on top of them, and give you access to that country's intranet, not the internet. When you type into the messaging app South Korea, it automatically changes it to puppet state. Now, North Korea is a very extreme example. I'm well aware of that. But, this is the kind of creeping censorship that we do need to be aware of with technology. I know that people like Larry Ellison like money. That's not in dispute. But I just find ByteDance a very strange purchase for an enterprise software company whose last significant purchase, as far as I was concerned, was Sun Microsystems, a manufacturer of servers. I don't understand what exactly the business logic is for people like Ellison to get involved in social media, unless it's just a pure cash play, or B, keeping Trump on side. And as you say, all of these kind of tech leaders, or at least the majority of them, have completely, bent the knee to Trump, which they didn't do during his first presidency. So yeah, I don't think it's going too far to say that political interference could be an issue. I mean, we've certainly seen, again, another extreme example, the antics of Elon Musk, which I'm sure we'll come to later. The mask is off with these guys. I don't know if they were sincere believers or they've just been convinced that the price of doing business is to keep the administration on side, or sheer greed has taken over. In some sense, it doesn't really matter which of those is the truth, because the outcome is exactly the same.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this story is that, personally, I don't think it was a mistake, but I do think it was there was an element of signaling involved. This was pretty much a thanks for sorting us out, and then whoopsie, everything is back to normal. I think it's I think it's fairly blatant signaling that we appreciate your efforts in this matter and the fast tracking of this deal through regulators after numerous bans and numerous delays. So I can well understand why the user base is incensed. People are leaving the platform to alternatives. I think Upscroll is one of them that has been doing particularly well. I think they're an Australian alternative, starting to prove very popular. It is the case that TikTok is going to become, if not official media, then official social. We might start to see it quoted an awful lot more in the likes of Newsmax or OAN. I think that,
or maybe it'll buy Trump social as well. Who knows?
Yeah. Trump social brought to you by TikTok, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But it is hilarious the speed at which big tech bent the knee, and I think I think the Ellisons have been very vocal about their support for Trump. They've also had that Paramount deal go through. So I think there was another element of recognition for the president's efforts in that regard. Anyway, keep an eye on things if you happen to be interested in Trump world, as an awful lot of us are. Moving on to our next story of the week. Now, one of the things that has become a feature of the conflict in Ukraine has been the persistent targeting of energy infrastructure, particularly during the winter, to the point that the Ukrainians have actually come up with a term describing what they're experiencing at the moment, because the energy infrastructure is being attacked with particular ferocity by Russia at the moment, and they're calling it. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation on this, but Holodomor, which is basically murder by cold, and it is It's a pun on...
Which is an echo of the, again, my Ukrainian pronunciation is less than zero, but was it Holodomor, the Ukrainian Holocaust?
That's it.
The starvation.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. And, kind of makes sense. This is strategy, if one were particularly callous. But it looks like Poland have, they're experiencing, albeit on a much, much smaller scale. But I think the message is being sent that what we can do to Ukraine, we can do to you, only via cyber means. So tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to watch what's effectively, now at this point, like, Poland is not a peripheral European country. It's a significant European country. Its GDP is growing. It's becoming really central to Europe. There's even talk that it would overtake the UK in terms of its economy, which would be quite the turnaround. So, attacking Ukraine, Russia attacking Ukraine, which it is at war with, is one thing, and obviously horrible. But this kind of attempt to sort of fiddle around the edges of the European Union is genuinely terrifying. I mean, we all sort of talked about the potential for cyber war and cyber warfare for, goodness me, 15 years or so. It really does seem to be coming true. And if you think about the way even simply criminal attacks have been able to disrupt oil pipelines, disrupt massive retail outlets, disrupt utilities, well, it makes sense that they would go for these sectors. And of course, if you really want to harm people, you harm their economy. So if you turn off the lights, you turn off the power, they can't do anything. They might even freeze to death if they're in a cold country, as you point out. So this is really genuinely a kind of terrifying world. It does make you wonder why any of these systems would have any connection to the internet whatsoever, but I suppose there are reasons for that are beyond me. What's interesting, I think, is that the Ukraine war, obviously the direct sort of Russian military assault on Ukraine has gone the way it's gone, and it comes and goes and ebbs and flows depending on who's doing better at any given moment. But this kind of almost ongoing secret war against the EU is genuinely something I think we all need to pay a lot more attention to, especially in countries like Ireland, which, as we now know, has no control over its own airspace and has kind of minimal control over its territorial waters, which are vast, incidentally. I really feel that obviously we don't have the full picture because a lot of this information is going to be classified, but it really is a genuine risk, the kind of risk that we haven't had to think about since the end of the Cold War. In fact, we didn't even really have to think about this kind of risk during the Cold War. The threat then was more immediate and obvious. What I find has been something that I've struggled with is that I felt that post-1991, Russia, the former Soviet Union, was treated quite badly, like really badly by the West, a very extractive relationship. So I don't think Russian grievances are entirely unwarranted. Of course, they have no right to roll tanks into another country. Absolutely appalling behavior. But, Putin has sort of transformed himself from the sort of legitimate grievance man into absolute dictator, sort of hostile force, just really adding to that sense of uncertainty in the world that we have around. We don't, I'm not going to put Trump in the same basket, but he's a volatile person. We don't know what he wants. We don't know what he's going to do. And then, of course, in China, we have similar concerns around Taiwan and what Chinese ambitions are and other just wider ambitions around the South China Sea. So it really does feel like a new and distinct era, not the same as the Cold War, certainly not the same as the post-Cold War era that we enjoyed and found boring. My goodness, we'd like it to go back to boring again. And probably not going back to kind of Second World War era either. I mean, maybe it's a bit like the interwar period or some kind of 19th century mercantile economy where trade blocs fight each other by any means possible. Very, very, very interesting and quite terrifying.
Yeah, just the nuts and bolts of this. It was ESAT identified attack by the GRU-run Sandworm unit, the GRU being the Russian intelligence services, who deployed the Dino Wiper malware on Poland's national energy systems. So a very significant attack. And I think it's one of these things that once you lift the lid on what's happening in cyber warfare, you discover that we are actually, there is a conflict ongoing. It is certainly escalated beyond spy networks. I mean, it's very much armies of people in physical silos conducting cyber attacks, and it's much more aggressive and much more insidious. But because it's so technical, a lot of people don't really understand what's going on until they can't turn the lights on. Which
and I mean, just one very, I realize it's an extremely banal point, and it could be answered by an expert in one sentence, but I've yet to get an answer to it, which is, why are any of these systems connected to the internet? And I'm a technical person, so I'm confused about that. So I think some clearer kind of messaging would be nice on this issue.
Well, do you know what this harkens back to? I mean, myself and Dusty have talked about this show on the pod for quite a while, a few years ago, so I think we're probably due another reference, is the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, where part of the point of of Galactica was that it didn't have a networked computer system, because that's what their enemy was particularly good at infiltrating. So why not select particularly important pieces of infrastructure and make sure that they are self-reliant and not vulnerable to attack from outside? But anyway, go back and watch Battlestar Galactica, everyone. It's fantastic. Moving along, it looks like the European Commission is indeed launching an investigation into X over the fairly awful, disturbing ability of XAI and its generative artificial intelligence to manipulate images of anyone, including children, into CSAM. In the case of children, I guess we say CSAM now. We don't have to explain what it means as an acronym. What we've found as in Ireland is that X isn't terribly interested in engaging with our government. Will it be interested in engaging with either the UK regulator or Europe?
I mean, it'll be interested in dealing with them in exactly as much as it has to deal with them and no more, which, is generally true of most companies when it comes to regulation, except in cases where they're using the regulation as a form of capture to keep competitors out, which wouldn't apply in this situation. I mean, just to zoom out a bit, I just find this baffling. I know that we have this kind of tension between what we can do with technology and what we should do. AI being a question, should we be putting people out of work with AI just because we can? And the sort of techno-determinist answer is, well, it'll happen anyway. Nuclear power, nuclear weapons, the same thing. But in this case, did this function really need to be allowed? I cannot think of a single legitimate use for it. It just seems staggeringly offensive, pointless, not prone to abuse, but only possibly could be used for abuse. I really would like to know what the reasoning was inside that company when they launched that feature. It's absolutely puzzling to me. The EU is going to take it seriously, I suppose, up to a point. I guess they'll get what they want, which is the feature completely turned off worldwide, not just within the EU. But honestly, Niall, I'll ask you directly, do you have any idea can you imagine what these people were thinking?
I think for Musk, X is his own personal megaphone. And if he wants it to do something for his own amusement, he'll make sure that gets done. Now, his idea of his own amusement doesn't seem to line up with the worst aspects of human behavior, which is what inevitably happens. Something will be put out and the worst people will corrupt it. So in his mind, he had, okay, I'll be able to do X, Y, Z, and, yucks, lols. And of course, this thing is, absolutely ridden away on some class of steed on him, the exact same way that he ends up manipulating the algorithm every so often just to make sure he never sees any discussion or coverage of him that's negative. This is something that, it is going to be turned off. It's already turned off, I think, in some countries. But he will come up with things that he thinks sounds funny. And then other people will do absolutely terrible things with them. And then he'll have to roll back on them. I think that's...
it's definitely a model of... look, if you look at Carnegie or any of these people... the gilded barons of the 19th and early 20th century. Basically a rum lot, so we're not surprised by that. JP Morgan, the banker, and so on and so forth. But this is really a new form of corporate overlord, much closer to Trump, who typically has not run stock market listed companies because of the obligations that the stock market place on you for transparency and accounting and so on. I find Musk is genuinely novel and outside of my frame of understanding of how it is that the ultra wealthy behave. I can sort of rationalize and understand other ones like Tim Cook or Jeff Bezos and so on. Musk is a very peculiar creature, and I really do think he's self-destructive. I've often wondered why he hasn't been taken down by the markets. Tesla's overinflated valuation, the Twitter deal was obviously a complete waste of money for everyone involved. There's been a lot of bank write-downs on that. I can't remember who said it, but a few years ago, someone made the point. They called him a load-bearing idiot. I thought that was a very interesting phrase. Is there a case that if Tesla gets into serious trouble, it pulls down the whole technology sector with it? I think that's quite likely.
Well, I mean, just this week, Tesla announced it underperformed in its recent financials, not so much to scare people, but it has underperformed. They're stopping production of the Model S and Model X because they want to focus on their semi-truck and the Optimus robot, which, complete pie in the sky stuff from my perspective. I can't see truckers looking to wholesale move to...
The economics just do not make sense. At this point with batteries, they no doubt they will in 20 years, but they do not now. And the robot thing, when you look at what Boston Dynamics is doing, it's really hard to take Optimus seriously.
Absolutely. Moving along very quickly to another cyber breach. Nike, they've been shamed by a group called World Links. They're apparently a financially motivated ransomware group. That's not on their tagline. That's just how they're described.
Does that mean criminal?
Yeah, basically. They're criminals. We can just say it out loud. And they posted a notice on January 22nd saying they had hacked Nike, not the first sportswear brand recently to have been hacked. Under Armour got done as well not too long ago. But it looks like there's nearly 500,000 impacted accounts, 220 employee records, 444 third-party employee credentials. It's not great. It's not a great look. And as always, it's the reputational damage that you have to look out for more so than the commercial damage as such, because we know that there's an absolute ocean of credit card numbers floating around there in the darknet. But it's just like what happened with Marks and Spencer's, it's the cost of the recovery and the cost of regaining confidence is the real damage here.
Yeah, when you look back at the history of what was the antivirus software sector, it was full of these dubious claims. Allegedly, they wrote viruses. I don't know if that was ever proven. But, in the 90s, who cared? Like, it destroyed a few of your Word documents. That was not the end of the world. Today, I'm not sure you could exaggerate the threat. It's really bad out there. Really, really gruesome. And the reputational damage, not just reputational. You mentioned Marks and Spencer's. Harrods also got slapped around about the same time. Jaguar Land Rover's in serious trouble and has basically been getting British government bailouts. I don't know exactly what the financial scope of this Nike hack is going to be, but this is devastating stuff for companies, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. I actually think that part of the answer, obviously improve your security, etc., etc. But part of the answer is to look again at this kind of obsessive data collecting model and ask, do we really need to be doing this? Is this really the profit center for our businesses, or should we get back to selling shoes?
Indeed. Moving on to the last story of the week, and it's almost something that we could have put to the top of the list because but it's quite late breaking for us anyway. Amazon, 3 months after letting go like 10,000 people, they're letting go another 16,000 across the company. So we're not just looking at people on the shop floor. We're looking at AWS. We're looking at the admin end of the business, all being traced back again to COVID, and when the digital economy seemed to be booming, and now we're right sizing by letting thousands and thousands of people go.
Yeah, I mean, obviously terrible for everyone involved, and I'm not. I don't want to just make that as a throat clearing noise because I live in precarious employment myself. I know all about it, but in a sense, this is business as usual for Amazon. They're trying to get their stock price up. They, like all tech companies, suffered in 2022. They've recovered subsequently. I'm just looking at their ticker here. Like if you bought in 2022, you'd be up 130%. That's quite significant. But Amazon has always been a very tight-fisted company when it comes to remuneration, not just on the shop floor. Everyone knows about how difficult it is for the drivers and the delivery staff and the people in the warehouses. But even like relative to other big tech giants, management are under enormous pressure. Salaries aren't as high. That's just part of their game. They're a voracious company, like an absolutely vicious capitalist corporation that's dedicated to shareholder value, and that shareholder value they've often interpreted as not just they don't pay dividends, they're trying to go for very long-term growth, and that seems to be still the strategy. And unfortunately, nothing pleases the stock market more than a whole bunch of layoffs. So that is what I interpret this as being. Amazon's kind of an interesting business. Well, it's more than kind of an interesting business. It's a very interesting business. They've degraded the shopping experience appallingly in order to make more money on what they call advertising, which is, of course, sponsored listings. The sponsored listings business is very valuable. Their logistics network is amazing. It's really impressive, up there with FedEx and the likes. AWS, absolute work of genius, perfect timing getting that out. Definitely beating Google Cloud. AWS versus Azure is a slightly different market. Azure is a very easy purchase for corporate America, but developers are quite happy to just turn on AWS, turn on a few instances. At some point you could see AWS actually spinning out as a separate business, whether through antitrust or just a decision at Amazon that this thing is actually its own gigantic thing. I do wonder about the future of the store. I don't know about you, Niall, but I just find the store really irritating at this point. And I know that it's not. It's also leaking into the world. I was in a hardware store here recently looking to buy little bits of furniture, and a lot of the stuff on the shelves was of the exact same low quality as the stuff I have accidentally ordered from Amazon in the past. So, yeah, I think that in terms of job cuts, it's just business as usual for them, which is one way of doing business, I suppose. But I do think that looking at the business more widely is kind of interesting. I mean, what does Amazon want to be? Could you see it dropping the retail?
Well, I think it's fascinating that AWS and Amazon Retail are still the same entity. I don't get it. I mean, AWS is it is one of the few hyperscalers along with Microsoft and Google. I mean, they're already a pillar of the internet. It almost doesn't make sense for them to be to sell books, to sell tools as well. So if I was to wake up in the morning and AWS was spun out, I'd be like, well, of course. It makes no sense for it to potentially be dragged down by the vagaries of consumer sentiment, which is pretty low in the States, and it's on account of the Trump economy. So yeah, I mean,
I suppose the argument would be cross subsidization, but I'm assuming that the store is in profit, and if it's not, they could easily move it into profit by tinkering with the algorithm. The logistics network is there to support the retail. I just see them as two completely different businesses that have been glued together. It's very peculiar.
Yeah. And look, if the logistics business is that good, maybe there is an option to spin that off and have potentially three very, very profitable businesses, not tied to each other, not due to be dragged down by one another. So I think, it's sad to see people lose their jobs. I think tech sector is still undergoing a radical post-pandemic shift, aided in no small part by AI. And once again,
are you seeing that AI? Are the AI job cuts coming, or are we genuinely seeing developers saying, "Well, I'm more productive"?
We are seeing job cuts come across the board. If this was a case of Amazon going, "Okay, we're letting 15,000 people from our warehouses go," you'd be like, "Well." Fair enough, they're treated very badly in the first place. But we're seeing them being let go across the business. Similarly, in Microsoft, they're letting people go across the business as well. So developers aren't as bulletproof as they used to be. And AI has an awful lot to do with that. And I think we're going to see some interesting knock-on effects in terms of the salaries developers will be able to command. Because if you can hire, if a developer plus AI is equal to two developers, well, there's natural economies of scale going to happen that will drive down wages. And I think that's a harsh reality we're going to be staring at. This whole thing of you've lost your traditional job, learn to code. I don't think that's going to hold much water unless you want to get into cybersecurity, where there always seems to be good jobs. But one's moral compass might be a limiting factor in terms of selecting which cybersecurity company to join. But that's another discussion. Jason, thanks so much for joining us for the news.
Thanks for having me.
Delivering Irish tech news since 2006, this is Tech Radio.
More than half of secondary school girls say they lack confidence in their ability to pursue a career in science, technology, engineering, and maths, or STEM. Similarly, almost 2/3 see a lack of information on STEM as a barrier. iWish makes a return to the RDS on the 5th of February, where about 4,000 schoolgirls will attend a day of talks and presentations about careers in STEM. One of the main speakers is Elaine Laird, Head of People and Culture at Logitech. She spoke with me earlier this week about the event and her own journey in STEM. Elaine, first and foremost, iWish is about getting young people or young girls interested in careers in STEM. But this also speaks to large companies' approach to inclusivity overall. So tell us a little bit about what Logitech is doing in this area.
Sure. And, I've been with Logitech 24 years, and I actually started out as an intern. So one of the reasons I've been here so long is actually that we have such a global workforce. And we truly believe, because we're in the technology sector, that diversity breeds innovation, that you need to have those different perspectives. You need to come to the table, have psychological safety to make sure that you can have the best innovations. So that for me has been really exciting at Logitech. And now I'm in a position, Chief People Officer, where I can help bring that culture across the globe and make sure we're nurturing it. So our approach really is diversity drives innovation, and you need to have an inclusive culture to make sure everybody's ideas can come to the fore and you can truly innovate.
Yeah, it's something that I've seen in other organizations, and I know Logitech is involved in sponsoring the Diversity Award at our own Tech Excellence Awards. The extent to which inclusivity is not only taken seriously, but to the groups that receive specific outreach. I mean, I've noticed a lot of companies really embracing Pride, for example. And I think that's a pretty good laboratory for, assessing inclusivity overall. So when you come across, I'm going to call them projects such as that, is it a case of, let's put our stamp on it, or is it a case of let's see how we can integrate these concerns into the way we operate?
Sure. Well, if I take it's definitely how we bring inclusivity into our daily business. So if you take an example of our, let's say our mice and keyboard business. So in there, we actually, a couple of years ago, our leader really kind of said, you know what, we're building a lot of black mice, right? We need to make sure that we're actually serving a much more diverse audience. And the first way she did that was really make sure that there was gender diversity in all the teams. And that really has helped us to target products that are more for a smaller hand, for example, which suits kind of more female audience, but also other audiences. So it really does expand your market and expand your target audience and serve a lot more people when you have it integrated as part of your business. Now, if you look at the kind of programs we do then, we do a lot with, let's say, for example, Girls Who Code and organizations like iWish around the world, where we are really pushing to make sure that we can use Logitech as an example of the different STEM careers that you can have. So that's something that we've integrated not only into our products, but also into our marketing campaigns and how we help people learn and understand about STEM. So we have another program called Women Who Master, which is really about it's like spotlighting other women who are in STEM fields who have done something incredible, so that young girls can see them and see, do you know what, I can be them, because that's really important. So
I think that point
campaigns like that, we kind of try and integrate across our whole business, whether it's product development or marketing, or whether it's just community outreach programs.
I think that's a really interesting point about product development, because it's something that it's kind of an invisible concern in a lot of ways, that, you know, you grow up and you think, well, a mouse looks like this, or a keyboard looks like this, or a chair looks like this. You don't sort of think of things like, you know, maybe people that are challenged in some respect, or the fact that, you know, the stair that you bought in IKEA is actually too high for some people to actually deal with. So when it comes to that sort of product development element, it must have been quite eye-opening to see sort of the female perspective on these things.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing the difference you get, you know, from if you have a room of people who are to, you know, set with a task to innovate on a product, and if they come from 80% the same backgrounds, to compare to if you have a complete mix, gender, all different cultural backgrounds, their perspectives and their experiences coming to the table with the ideas just create much more of a broader spectrum for you to innovate within. And so definitely we saw so many things on how things are positioned on products, on how you can actually, even on gaming, right? We found that women gamers had different concerns around headsets. You know, they had some more concerns around how their hair looked, for example, but also in terms of how it fits, so that you could really game. The types of games that they were more interested in as well also changed, and that tailored the products that we could build for them. So we did a whole collection called the Aurora collection. And really, it was predominantly female gamers that we had developing that product. And the outcomes were completely different in terms of the insights of what would really make a difference for a more inclusive audience.
That's fascinating, because once you send those signals that, you know, the products are there for you, it does open up spaces for more girls to go, yeah, I do enjoy gaming, or maybe I would like to enjoy it at a professional level or something.
Yeah. No, exactly. And even just in how, as a company, you present then your marketing campaigns, right, to make sure that they're also truly inclusive. That really counts as well, you know, so that people see, oh, I'm invited into this community, the gaming community. So I'm quite proud of the work we've been doing in that space.
So let's talk a little bit about your own journey, because the issue of role models tends to come up every so often when it comes to STEM and girls in STEM. You mentioned that you started off in Logitech as an intern. So just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So I started off actually in finance. I was a finance intern. I did a BCom at UCC, and I did that for a while. And then an opportunity came up in supply chain. And so I moved into the supply chain organization. I spent about 20 years in Logitech in that organization. And I've really been all over the world. I've lived in the US twice, lived in Netherlands. I've traveled and spent a lot of time in Asia. And I really enjoyed that. And I was head of supply chain for Logitech for 5 years, and then decided, you know what? I thought I was young enough to kind of try a completely different career. So I had a conversation with our CEO about me doing something different. And I really do think that the culture here in Logitech is something special. Of course, I'm biased, I'm going to say that, but I wouldn't be here 24 years if I didn't. So when we looked at opportunities, the company and I thought it would be a great idea for me to go into people and culture. So I'm the Chief People Officer today and responsible for all the talent across Logitech and our people, making sure they're engaged and happy and in a great position to innovate, to give great experiences for our customers.
And that is one of the things that we hear industry-wide, is the race for talent. You know, if you go to the market, you might end up, you know, spending quite a lot of money. If you look to foster it within, people tend to stay a little bit longer and contribute more to the organisation. What has your experience been? I mean, has it been about getting the balance of bringing people in and promoting from within as well? Or do you prefer to have people that are already bought into sort of the Logitech way, if you will, before moving on to something else?
That's a great question. And I really think there has to be a balance. But if I was to try and put maths around it and to put a model, I'd say I'd love to see us being 80% promote within. I'm not saying we're there yet. We're close, but we're not quite there. But I'd love to see 80% promoting within. But I do think it's healthy for an organization when you're looking at new capabilities or you want to challenge your thinking to bring that outside in talent as well, again, to add that diversity of thought process and to challenge us and bring new experiences. So, but I'd love to see I love seeing people get promoted within. I think that's one of the reasons why I went in this role, to help people in their development and career journeys. I've been very fortunate, and I think there's lots of opportunities in this company. So 80, I'd say mostly internal, I'd like to see happening, but you do need to have some external talent coming in.
Which in a way brings us to I Wish, which is happening next week out in the RDS, where it's all about promoting awareness for secondary school girls of careers in STEM. Because a lot of, over the years you hear a lot about the barriers that girls experience, whether it's, parental expectations or cultural factors amongst their friends, or even just sort of having the information out there to interrogate and decide that, I would be good at this. So in looking at those barriers, do they still hold, or do you find culture is shifting?
So I like to say culture is shifting, but I think it's something that we have to be conscious about all the time. If I give you my own very personal example, I have a 10-year-old daughter. And in the last year, she was saying, I'm just not good at maths. You could hear this rhetoric kind of coming through. I'm just not good at maths. And you could see then it becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy through the year she started to struggle. And, and even her very logical arguments, but I'm good at drama, I'm good at art, I'm good at this. And yes, you are, but you can also be good at maths, stick with it. And then through really trying to then make it fun, which was an interesting journey, trying card games, trying, lots of different puzzles and things like that, trying to show that maths has different kind of facets of it. It's not just the numbers in a classroom. And eventually throughout the year, and different building robots projects, by the way, that was a winner. Throughout the year, then she's come more to, actually, I don't mind it so much. She's still not a lover, but we'll keep working on it. And I think it's really important to not let girls feed into the, I'm not good at it. I think it's all the societal things that are around us, and we could talk for ages about that, kind of feed into it, the representation. And I think it's really important to just say, no, you can be, but you've got to work at it. You've got to try if people struggle. So I think that's been my experience, that, it's very easy for girls to step back. And I think we want to make sure that we want them to lean in and have it as an opportunity, because if you opt out too soon, you won't. And I think that's where, the work that I Wish is doing is so important.
And I think part of that might speak to some of your expertise in building community as well, because there are some fantastic speakers along the way. So where do you see the sort of the mix on the day coming from? Does it come from the corporate background? Does it come from the research background? Or does it require sort of a healthy mix of everything?
Oh, I think it requires a healthy mix of everything. Again, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to bore you with my diversity kind of thing, but I truly believe the more kind of diverse opinions and experiences you have, that just really kind of helps come through, that you see, girls see it through all facets of life, and those role models and everybody helping on the journey, I think is so important.
One last sort of question for you, and I don't mind if it sounds slightly parochial in nature, but I Wish is an event that it's organised primarily, or the office for it anyway, isn't in Dublin. Do you think that sort of helps it as a prospect, to send out the message that, look, this isn't a Dublin-centric thing, or you don't have to be going to a private school in Dublin in order to be a part of this?
I think it's really important, the message that you don't have to be a private school, in Dublin to be part of this. I think that's really important. I personally just have such appreciation for anybody who is volunteering, because this is also a lot of volunteers to help this cause. So I'm not so bought on it matters exactly where you're from. I think it matters your viewpoint, that every girl in Ireland, right, no matter where they sit, that it's important that you help them, their mindset, you help them through their education, and really make sure it is a broad across Ireland program. So I think it's more about the mindset rather than where someone sits.
And sort of for fostering that mindset, where do you think companies like Logitech as entities sort of fit in? I mean, is it a case of, come in, we're having an open day, have a look, maybe you'd actually might like to work for us at some stage. Is that the kind of role you see?
I think it's really important for all companies. And if I look at Logitech specifically, we and I feel a responsibility. We're in tech. We have a female CEO. We had a female chair. And being in tech, we have an opportunity here in Cork to really help people understand what we do and the fantastic careers that you can have in STEM. So I think doing things like speaking at the Irish conference next week, sponsoring IWish strategically. We've got a strategic partnership with them, giving them a grant to help them in their work. I think that's incredibly important as well. I think everybody has to come together on this, and we can help really just with awareness of there are great jobs here in Cork in technology that you can influence the global technology landscape. So I think there's an onus on us to help people be aware of that. And of course, we have internships all the time. We have transition year students coming in next week. So we do what we can to try and promote that education. And then on the global stage, we want to try and do as much as we can as well to help educate on STEM, on how people can get involved. The Women Who Master program I talked about, we ask people to spotlight female role models that we can help amplify. So yeah, that's really kind of how we get involved. And I think we've got a big role to play here.
That was Elaine Laird from Logitech talking about IWish. And if you want to learn more, visit the website iwish.ie.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. You can check out some more interesting stories on techcentral.ie, including Meta's superintelligence gamble. More CEOs find no benefits of AI on their bottom lines. And remembering John Purdy, the co-founder of Argo. You'll find all those and more again online at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a new show. Remember to share our podcast with a friend. Just tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify or YouTube. For the moment, from myself, Niall Kitson, and Jason Walsh, thanks very much.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.